Hello, everyone. It's Mike Merker. This is episode 22 of People Solving Impossible Puzzles. And I'm joined by two lovely people. Would you like to introduce yourself? We will go ladies first. Ladies first.
Thank you. I'm Sue Loebser, um, an educator for very many years, and working together with Oren to help businesses be successful.
Beautiful. And Oren, can we have a short blurb from yourself as well?
For sure. Oren Roelofsen, I guess the founder of Guvrix, our software, and residing in Israel. So made Aliyah 7 years ago, and so absolutely loving it here. So.
Amazing, amazing. And I'm coming in from Toronto, Canada, and we have a few countries represented beautifully. And why don't we start with maybe a little background, as this is a newish piece of software. What were you guys doing before you were building software companies?
Oren, you stop.
So before I did this, when I was in America, in Atlanta, I worked for several large companies. And I was in charge of the IT and accounting and the governance side of it. And so I noticed things that were, even in the largest of companies, you get, the last one I worked at was roughly a $10 billion division. And we were still using spreadsheets to manage governance. So if there was a change, you had to send out spreadsheets, and you had these giant ones that had everybody's location and stuff. So from that, when I moved to Israel, or in the process actually, I started thinking about how can we simplify this. So, like I said, when I moved to Israel, I got what everybody does when they come here. How can I start my own company, and become an entrepreneur? So I went from a corporate person to becoming an entrepreneur. And then, and before I left Atlanta, we had met Susan and her family, our family and her children and everybody. So we had got to know her real well. And so she started doing some help with me online. And the next thing you know, we kind of partnered up here, and that's kind of how the beginning of the genesis of my company.
I heard the word Genesis, and I heard the word startup from corporate. These are very Israel Jewish terminologies for those who are not picking up on it. Very interesting. And Sue, how would you describe the Genesis from your perspective?
Well, so Oren shared, we've known each other a long time. My kids went to school together, and I knew what he was doing, and I came from an education background. I was the director of technology at Jewish day schools for 22 years, and this is episode 22, so there you go. I was involved, when I left the schools, I got involved in online training for businesses. And for me, there was a disconnect because people were being trained, and then training and retraining was not happening, and training was not filtering through from the courses to actually making changes in business. There's something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. So
No.
Ebbinghaus, he lived in from 1870 odd to the early 1900s. And he did research which showed that people forgot up to 70 or 75% of what they learned within a day of learning it. And that happens to everybody. If it's material you're familiar with, you might remember a little more. If it's something that's below your level of expertise, you might remember a bit more. But if you're hungry or tired or distracted, it's even less. You can go to training for 8 hours in a day, and I can ask you, what did you learn? And you can tell me in 4 sentences, that's what I learned. So working with that and experiencing that, and we did research and surveys which showed that was true. It became concerning to me that we were always training this top layer of people and then teaching them best practices, and then they'd go back to work and never implement it. There was nothing in place. And I was helping Oren with some things, and I just felt that this was an important piece. Governance was an important piece of this puzzle that was missing. So if you teach people best practices, and then with that knowledge, you help them identify gaps in governance and compliance that are in their business in an easy way, because you run your own business, I run my own business, but I don't even know what questions to ask for governance. I don't know, do you have a plan in place if your main vendor goes broke? Do you have a plan in place if there's an emergency flood, something that takes your power? These are things you don't think of in your everyday. So he has something, or Aaron developed something that's really simple, that identifies the gaps, then gives you information to help you address them. So it's all very well saying you need to have an XYZ. Your next question is, how do I do it? And so we identify the gaps, we give people guidance on how to address those gaps. We allow you to assign it to a person so you can track it. And then as the final step, we encourage you to implement those and then retake the quizzes. We call them quizzes. It's just questions where you answer yes or no to. But we encourage you to retake it, so that if you take a gap analysis and you start off with 30 gaps and a high risk score, and then you start to address these, you take it again in 3 months, your risk score decreases. You have metrics that are real. You're not guessing anymore. You've got KPIs, and you can say, yes, this is better. And we've had some instances where things get worse. So, we've put this into places that have got high consequence pathogens, and they introduce something they never had before, and they don't have something in place, so their risk score goes up. But you're tracking things. So, and then part of that also, it encourages retraining. So you start to get this circle. I train people, I look for gaps in the business, I can train people, and I strengthen the business and I strengthen my staff. It's not just I train you and you go home and you forget about it, and nothing filters through to the business to help you make it strong. So, for me, it was synergistic. It really, what Oren does, or we do now, complements very much what I was doing on my own. And
amazing.
As an FYI, we did a couple of projects for the Department of State in the MENA region, where we did the training, and we did the Guvrix governance software in hospitals and universities. And we also had the cybersecurity module and the cyber biosecurity module. So we did that, and then as the final piece, we did something called nudge learning, which addresses, it's really the third piece of the puzzle. The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, people forget. The 2 ways that you can address that is through mnemonics. I always smile. Growing up in South Africa, we had the metric system, and we learned King Henry David makes delicious crunchy marshmallows, and that was kilometers, hectometers, decameters. That's the only reason I remember it. And then repetition. And nudge learning sends out something to people's phones on a schedule to remind them of content that they've learned. So if you change a policy and procedure, you can send out little nudges to remind people, train them of things, and increase the level of retention. So
Very interesting. Okay, wow, we've opened quite a quite a can of worms over here. And before we get deeper into it, can we let's maybe talk a little bit about the Aleph Bet Gimel, or the ABCs of governance, just for someone who is a business owner, but they may not they may not be so familiar with what even governance is. Could we talk a little bit about what even is governance for a startup, a guy who's a guy or a group of young ladies who may be 22 years old and they just finished college or university? What should they be thinking about in the ideas of governance?
Oh, yeah. It's
Well,
very much Oren's thing, but in my mind, governance is the rules and the regulations. So you have rules, responsibilities, and oversights. And if you have those in place, you can manage your business more effectively, consistently, and I think reliably and responsibly. So the question you're asking, though, is a really good one, because what happens is people don't know what they don't know, which we've mentioned before. So you can start off small, okay, and you can manage fairly well if there's one of you or two of you without having policies. But then you hire somebody, let's say, because you're growing, and you don't have a policy on how to handle payments, for example. So if you don't have something that says the same person who opens the mail can't deposit the checks, you open yourself to fraud. If it's just you opening, you're good, you're responsible. As soon as you start hiring people, you need to look at what do I need to have in place so that I can grow, to stop fraud, to lessen your risk. You don't want to be negligent.
Excellent. Sorry to interrupt you there. The idea of we have to be, it's not all fun and games. Here's a product we put together, a small tech startup, a small company, and now we're starting to grow. It's not all fun and games and, oh, we got some investment. Oh, I'm the coolest kid in my alumni group. It starts to get very real. It starts to get very real, and problems will arise. Problems will arise, and if we don't, and we have to be thinking about what will happen next year, the year after. What else, Oren?
So Mike, and I'll expand on what we were talking about here. So if I look at governance, people often say, "Oh, it's a compliance. I got to be compliant with this federal law. It's a labor law." Or if I'm doing working in a restaurant, I have food and safety laws. So there's basic compliances where if I don't do it, I'm going to get fined by the government, let's say. And then there's always the technical side of it. So everybody thinks that I can solve a problem by putting some new technology in place. But what we found, or what I found, especially in my history, but also it really came to light when working on Guvrix here, is that compliance is maybe 10%. I'm picking a number, but it's like 10% of total governance, and technical is usually maybe 10%, if that. I'm being generous, of total governance. So then you look at it and say, okay, what everybody thinks of is this 20%, and below the waterline, there's this 80% of other things that a business needs to do to be successful. So, and I guess that's what, whenever we do this, we're always looking at how do we make this company that's using our product more successful. So as an example, if it's okay, I can
give some
expand
examples
on that a little bit. So one thing is managing data. So everybody gathers data, but how do you manage it and how do you use it? How do you manage? Sue mentioned this as you have all of a sudden you have a staff of people now, and even one employee can be one employee or multiple, or you're having contractors in now. And how do I manage them properly? And everybody has a key process, probably multiple ones. So if I'm running the restaurant, I have a certain process how I'm going to clean everywhere. And I have a certain process how I'm going to update menus daily or weekly or whatever it is. And so I have that. And then I got to manage the risks, which we talked about. And without getting too many more, everybody needs a strategic plan. Even the smallest company, how am I going to grow this? I can't just sit there and say, oh, well, I hope it all grows and I hope everything comes out good. Because some things can take 6 months, a year down the road before I can really start to see it. So I have to kind of plant those seeds. So those are what's behind the governance, the bulk of it, the 80, 90% of it is, okay, how do I set up an emergency plan? If my kitchen starts on fire, what do I do? What are the basic things? If somebody has a heart attack in my restaurant, what do I need to do? So we're looking at it from saying, okay, start that planning now. And then when it does happen, or you can start to really think about it, because we all get caught up in this, small companies, even large companies, but you get caught up in the idea that today's issues are the biggest issue on the planet. And we all have that. It's the biggest issue, and sometimes, especially as the owner or as a manager, you have to step back a little bit and say, okay, how can I improve these things so this doesn't happen every day? And so those are all the pieces that come together when we talk about governance. So
I'm just so I'm actually literally reflecting on like a phone call I had yesterday, and it was like a year ago I didn't think there would be a phone call where someone's like, hey Mike, I'm in a similar space to you, can I send you a bunch of stuff, can I send you the software I'm working on? And then I'm like, a year ago I would have been like, well, since that'll never happen in a year from now. And then all of a sudden things do start happening. You're walking, here's a little bit small analogy of, here's a little toy idea. Oh, and I'm just walking along. And then boom, here's a bunch of people are like, oh, we hate you, we like you, we're curious what you're doing, we're not sure what you're doing. Send a package to Sue. And she says, well, I don't even know what this is. And I'm like, you don't know what this is? This is, and then literally I'm like, okay, I thought a whole business is just you make things that people like for inventing, there's patents, whatever, and then magically the kids start buying it. Oh, wait a second, there are laws. There are laws. If a child is under 3, is it a choking hazard? What if Sue's grandchild chokes in Israel? And then my wife opens the mail and she's being sued by Sue. Sorry, Sue, to use you as an example, but or like hey, I'm in a similar space to you. I want to talk about software, and I'm like, wait a second. There's so much unknowns. There's so much of unknowns about like, well, I don't know if I should even open this email without calling my lawyer, so there's so many areas. And then what else? What are other situations? I'm looking at it from a small example. You're talking about big examples like kitchen.
Well, I can tell you 2 things. The first is it's really good for startups, because very often someone comes like you and they have the idea and they have the product knowledge, but they don't have the business knowledge. So
Mhm.
for most people, you have your area of expertise, which is very small. You can't afford to hire other people to help you. But the earlier you put governance in place, the more you enable growth and you create a foundation for growth. So, if you have a basic HR manual, which talks about hiring and benefits and whatever, then when you have to hire somebody, you have something, you have some
Yes.
documents that you can share that, you know, how they can use their computers, whether they can bring their own computer in from home, can they use their own email on your network, all those things that are liabilities that you don't think of. If you have them addressed, it's helpful. The second area we find it very helpful is that it appeals to funders. So
Mm.
we have a small nonprofit, for example, which they've been over a year um, on Guvrix, and their risk score has dropped substantially over time. And they can show to funders, you see what we started off with, this high risk score, X number of high priority risks, X number of low priority risks. We sort them from highest to low. And a funder likes that because they
Yes.
can see that somebody's, they're proactive. They've got mitigation actions in place. They've been thoughtful about new purchases, or how they're going to set up their network with, the Internet of Things. Your your
Yes.
your laundry machine connects to the internet. If it connects to the internet and you don't change that default password, anybody can get access to your home internet. For us with home businesses, it's much worse if you're in a hospital or anything else. So people, if they can prove to funders that they are thoughtful about the actual governance and compliance of the business, it's extremely helpful
Yeah, yeah.
to them.
Amazing.
So short term, long term, and then some people have to do it retroactively. They never gave it much thought, and unfortunately, a crisis happens, and then it's a crisis. you know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just jumping in to say, like, I remember for 4 years working as like a lead instructor for like a coding school, and I didn't start the school, and the coding school um, was the goal was only to teach older, like to teach adults or older students. And then one day when I started, I got the call, hey, what about teaching, basic the most basic ABCs of computer science to like little kids, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like, oh, no one's doing this. Oh, other schools would like to, we're also interested, and this school in New Jersey's interested, and this school in Toronto's interested, and this school in Montreal's interested. And then I'm just like, well, I thought I'm just a teacher. Then it became I'm the lead teacher. Then it became I'm like, oh wait, I'm supposed to like supervise, manage, and train people. There's a huge difference when things grow from one day or one year to the next, and then suddenly jobs change, roles change, new systems get implemented. And it was so interesting. Many times I was like, okay, well, let's train, let's say, three new teachers. How would we train them, right? So I'm like, so my approach was always, what would Mike Merker do? What works for Mike Merker? Well, I'm me, right? So I learn in
Right.
this style and in this way. And you guys are opening the whole challenge of like, well, there are different learning styles, and saying something once is not training. Making a
Right.
video and saying, hey, watch this video. And maybe I'll keep track of if you saw it or not, because I can go through the analytics. That's not good enough either. And then people make mistakes, and then you have to explain to them, oh, that was a mistake. And they go, I don't know, that was a mistake because it wasn't cleanly documented in the training. And then I realize, oh, this is my job now. I'm supposed to train people. And you're 100% right about like, yeah, when you, the earlier on, when you define like clean and clear practices about like, this is the goal, you know, this is where we're headed, this is the way things operate. It's not just the amorphous culture, an amorphous mess of people doing random things. Behind the scenes in every school or in every business, there's so many rules that have to be put in place, and you know, you don't always have the board of education to substantiate, like to get it started, or you don't have, it's a government job and it follows these government protocols. You're right, it could just be one day there's no business, a year later there's lots of business. So
The
yeah.
one thing you mentioned, and it's one of the things we also find a lot for example, when people's role change, do you have a policy in place to change their computer access? You know, you give somebody a login with certain rights depending on their role. And
Exactly.
if they're an administrator today and fired tomorrow, do you have a process in place? If they're a teacher today and an administrator tomorrow, you know, how does their access change? So these are things, it happens and you just don't think of it. So, but if you have this somewhere to refer to and you've given it thought, then, you know, you save yourself the risk of someone who's been let go still retaining access to some of your systems or things that can be potential threats.
Yeah. And I'm thinking here also about the difference between a lawyer who can prepare a contract or an intellectual property, an IP lawyer who can go over certain technology innovations. You guys are talking about the business's structure as opposed to, if there's a, you know, to prevent a lawsuit, we need a good contract. But you guys are talking about the totality of an operating business, that where things, we can never predict what's happening, and we can't hope to always rely on that contract, that 4-page contract that was signed, employee employer. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into the fires that the could we call it the 911 emergencies that you've experienced. There's got to be some that are the, oh, you're laughing, she's laughing, she's laughing.
No, it's not really that we experience the emergencies. So the goal is that we stop the emergencies, or when they happen, you know, people have a plan in place. So let's say, for example, in a biological research lab, do you have a policy in place if there's a spill? Okay, yes, you should. Okay, but what you don't always have is something in place when you need to call in law enforcement. So you have this dilemma. Have you had law enforcement come into your building and learn where your high consequence pathogens are, what PPE they need to put on, you know, where they need to shower if they're going? All those things are things that need to be documented and thought of before. If you do that, then when the accident happens, it's not a serious accident. So really, our goal is preventative, although there's, and mitigation.
Mitigation. And could you guys talk a little bit about, when do you call a lawyer versus when you can use Guvrix?
So I make a lot of notes at the bottom of everything I put in there that says, we are not a legal firm.
Thank God.
I mean, so I'm not trying to get around you, because I say we are not a legal firm. But if you do these things, you're going to reduce the need for a lot of legal action. You'll never get away from it. We all know that. Something happens, you get a disgruntled customer, something, ultimately somebody's going to want to come back after you. But if you do all the things that we suggest, then we say, whether it's legal or auditors, the government coming in for inspections, you've reduced your chances of some kind of failure, probably a huge percent, whatever that number is. I like to throw out numbers, but let's say it's 90%. You reduce the risk of having some problem with all that. So I never, and I'll say it again,
Good.
I never want to say that we follow a legal, you do us and you follow us and you won't have legal issues. But what we do try is to say, for all the topics that we suggest, we have gone through and said, okay, where has the government come in and say, these are the issues that we're finding in a lot of companies. And so we put those in there and say, hey, everybody's getting dinged on this. So if you do this, you're going to be ahead of the curve. So that's how we approach it.
I love it. And just to reflect that back, the goal is not you're in no way offering legal advice, but what you're doing is you're setting up the preventative measures so that everyone can be on the same page, getting everyone on the same page by asking those tough questions beforehand. What if an employee joins? What supervisory access? Do they get the access to Zoom recordings or Google Meet recordings? Are they to be dealing, like, who's responsible if there's a fire or if there's an emergency or even a, God forbid, a more serious attack or I understand. It's sort of like who's deputized to deal with certain issues in a certain way. And this is actually crucial because you can't expect, if there's, let's say, a data breach, you can't expect the CEO founder who's really a sales marketing lady. She's not going to be the best. She's not going to wear the police hat of a data breach.
So it's funny, a couple things you said there. First, the contracts. You mentioned that a few minutes ago. You look at contracts. We don't know every detail of every contract. Everyone's unique. But on the other hand, you could have a process in place that says every 6 months, somebody goes in and reviews a contract. And when you get a contract, write down in some kind of system or put it in some system that says, okay, when I have, these are the things that will trigger something else in that contract. And so those are the things we say in governance. Make sure you have a plan that you identify each one of those trigger points. And now I can plan for it. And so it's not after a year and you have this contract with the vendor and then suddenly he says, oh, you promised me you were going to give me this information. And you say, oh no, now everybody's scrambling till midnight trying to put data together. Instead, you're proactive. Once again, there's that word proactive, coming in at the beginning and planning for it. So
I'm opening up the some examples in my own life. Aside from that summer job I had riding an ice cream bicycle, one of my first real jobs, my mom was working at Scotia McLeod Investments. She was a investment advisor, and I remember her telling me explicitly, Michael, this is not the fairy tale here. Everything you see is strictly confidential. And I'm like, okay, I understand. She's like, no. Every name you see, every number you see, you're not to even, like, that is not to come outside of the office. And I was like, okay, I understand. And she's like, and if anything's photocopied, when there's photocopies or bindings, that needs to go back exactly where it was. We can't even leave, and everyone, this is a shared office space of 50 advisors. And I didn't understand this. I was a 17-year-old. I was like a little pipsqueak, 17 years old. And I understand now, looking back, that yes, everyone is working at an office, and there are, everyone has computers and phones, and there's certain networks and whatever. But each one has to be protective of their own information to such a high degree. And then even to get into you can't just walk into the a banking. This is like banking behind the scenes. You can't just walk into the facility. You have to go the employee access, and then it's like you need like there were security protocols. What if someone comes in, a door is left open, or a employee code was made available? What are the immediate measures you have to put in place? And then I thought I knew everything, and then it became, well, this is the branch manager, or this is the sort of the manager among the independent business operators. And then he spoke to me, goes, okay, Michael, this is very important. You're not to ever walk into this room. And I'm like, oh, but that room has all the free Pepsis. He goes,
That's right. It's so appealing.
I'm like, but that's the room with all the free Pepsis, right? And he goes, no, no, no. Yes, there are many free beverages. Yes. But no, no, no. Don't go in that room. Don't go in that room. I'm like, but it's just some papers, just some mathematics going on. It's like, no, that's the compliance. No, you don't want to go in there. and also photocopying. You can't just photocopy whatever you feel like. There's sensitive documents. A document that has certain information on it, you can never photocopy. And I'm like, it's just, again, if we don't know, we are like a child. We don't know what's going on. And so, blabbing a bit, I just remember now, looking back. Oh, it's been a while, but you need to tell. Even a part-time assistant needs to know the same rules as a trained owner or an operator. So it's not just the person who makes the most money. It's anyone who even comes in the facility needs to be aware. Like there are in many offices, there's like a room that's a private room where like emergency materials are kept, or special computers are made available for emergencies. And you have to back up stuff, and that's not a and Pepsi should not be left in there, so to speak. But I get
And
what you're
that's
saying.
interesting
Yeah.
because a big part of what we have for the employee side is onboarding. So when somebody comes on board, and we make a big deal of saying it's not just employees that you hired, it's contractors, consultants. And I've seen this so many times in my work career. We get these consultants and we almost treat them like we don't have to really follow what they do. Everybody just hires a consultant. So, well, it's a consultant, so we don't really worry about them. And the funny thing is, so much incorrect things, cybersecurity issues, were caused by a disgruntled consultant or a consultant who came in. Everybody, it's almost universal. People forget to take them out of the system because they just kind of fade away oftentimes. And so now you're sitting there with this consultant, and he has access. Typically, consultants have access to everything because they're in there looking at the big picture. So now you got this major cyber potential that can really go sour quickly. So that's we look at those things and say, okay, now let's get back to the basics. Onboarding. So when you did the onboarding, like you mentioned, you're trained. Don't go in this room because if you do, you're going to go blind or something like that. It's whatever it is.
In biomedical, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. And so we say, here's the 5 steps, whatever it is, to make it so that we eliminate a lot of those potential problems like that. So
if I can just add something, which is jumping on what you said and what Oren said, it's not enough to just tell people things. And that's really where governance is important. You have to have the written documents. You have to have the policies and procedures, because people are not going to remember what you told them for sure. And even, if you do initial onboarding training, the next day they've forgotten most of it. The next year they sure has forgotten, so certain things they may remember. So it's really important part of governance to have standard operating procedures and policies in place. That's the one thing. The other thing that I wanted to add is that the software is designed specifically for non-experts. So
Yes.
all it does is it asks you a question. Are your employees allowed to bring their laptops to work? And you answer yes or no. If you answer yes, then it says, it's a decision tree. Do you require them to have antivirus software on their computer? Yes or no. If you say no, then it becomes an actionable gap. So, you'll get in a report at the end that says your employees are bringing laptops to work. It's a risk. And this is how you can address that risk. So it's just a question that anybody who runs a business can answer. There's nothing that's beyond you. And then you say yes, no, and then it says, here's guidance on how to fix it. So no expert required. The other thing is we've costed it very, very reasonably. So it's an annual subscription, but it's $660 a year for a single location. So you're really looking at $2 a day or less, where if you were to hire a governance person, you're looking at $60,000. And a lot of the governance software made for bigger companies, you're starting at 30,000, 35,000. So it's quick to go through. Working on the actions takes time, but we usually recommend to people take one of your high risk that's been identified, one of your high risk items, and one medium risk and 4 low risk, and work on those this month. The low risk things are, instead of doing something every 6 months, do it every month. It's a very easy change to make. The highest risk thing that we've had was in an organization, do you have a biosecurity plan? And the answer was no. That's a huge risk. So, you have to start working on that straight away. But so the high risks tend to take a lot of time. The low risks tend to be easy. And people can start with 70, 80, 100 risks, depending how many topics they cover. And then you just choose what's your most critical, work on some of the most critical, a lot of the low level, and then slowly work towards closing those gaps. So no expert required, really affordable. And then, as I say, with the tracking over time, you can have meaningful data to share with funders, to share with board members.
Amazing. You know what? I'm just as we're having this discussion here, I'm just thinking about here, like for example, here we're just having a chat. I mean, we're live having the chat, but then it'll go out to YouTube and LinkedIn, and it'll say Guvrix, and then I'm thinking, what could I do to if someone calls me or reaches out and they go, what about that Guvrix, Mike? Should I do it? Do you do it? What would you say to them is like that punch, is the you must do it right now, urgently, because
you don't know what you don't know. So in other words, you don't know what risk is going to happen in the next minute. Active shooter, there's so much going on at the schools, a water main break, electricity outage. There's so much that can happen. And I think that you have to prepare for the unknown. And that's really risk management, risk motivation, or you have to, I can't say to you, this is going to happen tomorrow, so you should do it today. But I can tell you something will happen to your business, because every day something's going to happen. And whether it's from within or from outside, external, that you have little control over, or internal, where you have more control over. it's really important, and it's not expensive, and it's not hard to do. So it's not um, it's not an overwhelming thing. We have people that to take one of the quizzes can take you 10, 15 minutes. It's
I
not
love
long.
that. I got to jump in and I say that what really speaks to me is that you've reduced the cost. It's not some fancy schmancy corporate hullabaloo. Oh, bankrupt yourself for something you don't need. This is like a niche. There's like a fixed cost. It's very clear. I don't imagine Oren, popping out of the closet and being like, "Oh, and there's an extra $12 every month," blah blah blah. And I don't imagine Sue coming after you and being like, "Oh, and now we got your Visa card or your PayPal. We're gonna pull the rug out from under you." No, no, that's not gonna happen here. And also, it's very lightweight. Like I can just go on the system and I can immediately start learning myself and
Yeah.
updating myself. It's never too late. Could we say it's not too late if you haven't, if you didn't know yesterday or a year ago? We don't know what the future holds. It's not too late if your company's been around 2 years or 5 years or 10 years and you need to update. A small business needs to go back to the drawing board and be like, we didn't know that the janitorial staff would be coming on Wednesdays because we're now in this larger office space. And, how do we deal with that? Is there sensitive information? How do we deal with that? Anything could happen in real life. Here we're having a discussion live, and a gardener just appeared outside and, is pulling a thing and blowing leaves. Is that predictable? Life is so unpredictable.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think that's the crux of it. You don't know. I go through all this stuff, and all the different topics. We have over 200 topics. We have 7 vertical topics. So we
Yes.
have nonprofits is huge, and this is an interesting aside. I was speaking to a board member from a nonprofit in Boston, and he was saying to me, we discuss these things all the time. We discuss, oh, this might be a risk. He said, but it doesn't ever get further than that. It's never assigned to somebody to address. We don't know what to do about it. We just discuss it and then we move on to the next thing. So I think that this codifies a lot of stuff, and ties it to a person, gives people responsibility to see things are done. We have another person who trains nonprofits, who looks at the nonprofit module as an intake. So if she's
Oh.
helping other nonprofits, they take the quizzes, she identifies the gaps, she can then work with them to address the gaps. So nonprofits is one of our verticals. We have healthcare, we have senior living, hotels. Help me out, Aaron. There's 3 others, but so we have the vertical
And
ones.
small businesses, which is
Small business, our main one, which is small businesses. And that's who we designed this for. We really wanted to help small businesses grow. And in fact, one of our biggest growth areas right now is Kenya. So it's interesting. And we have users in Zimbabwe too, but small users and affordable for them too. We do have, and I need to add that, a different price for places that have multiple locations.
Mhm.
So I think it's $1,800 if they have 5 locations, because
Okay.
each location can have its own threats, its own risks, depending, it might be somewhere in Canada where it gets a lot of ice and snow,
Hey, that's
which
hey, Mister.
which
Hey,
may be
I heard
different
that.
to Florida, so where they have alligators. But the point is, you can't use one questionnaire for multiple locations. Even when we trained in one of the countries in the Middle East, we were trained in Lebanon, and we were doing biosecurity, border security, and agricultural security. They needed different questionnaires, even though they fall under, the same department. So we do have that. And then if organizations are bigger than that, there'd be other pricing. But for the standalone business, it is one price, and it's a subscription. But a lot of people go a long way to addressing everything fairly quickly. So
Yeah. I'm just reflecting now. I know probably like 50 founders where you don't know that your business is going to grow, or you don't know that you need to hire someone when you're just sitting and there's just some 3 or 4 co-founders or people at an early stage, a tech company, a startup. You don't realize a year from now, if this goes well and this goes well and now there's an investor involved, you don't realize that things get out of hand very quickly. Suddenly you have like a client base of 500 people, and everyone you have their phone numbers, you have access to their emails, you sometimes have their home addresses. Suddenly a consultant comes in to fix to do some software development. They're exposed to all the information. It is not a There's a difference between a luxury item like a nice chair in an office or a nice new MacBook for a staff member. There's a big difference to setting up the company for safely and securely, that everything's
right. Those
yeah.
data privacy laws are very strict. If your website operates out of Europe, you can get such fines if you're collecting data and you are not storing it securely.
Exactly.
So you're right about that.
This was an amazing session, and there's so much more. I would love to, maybe in a couple weeks, have you guys back to go deeper into it. Is there anything in the last couple minutes? Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to share with the audience?
No, it has been enjoyable talking to you on this, and as much as I love governance, I'm sure my mom by now would have fast forwarded the thing, so I don't want to keep going either. But we have built this thing with the idea that how can we help customers? How can we help these businesses? And I think that's helped kind of guide us so that we're not looking, we all have to make money, but we didn't do it just to make this dollar and find this extra thing. We built it so that it actually works for the businesses. And my philosophy is that at some point they'll start coming in, and Susan's doing a great job of pulling them in. And I think that's where, if I could say nothing else about what we've done here, is we put out a product that I think people can use immediately. And we're not just trying to, throw something out there, get a high price, and then hopefully nobody uses it and they keep just paying the subscription over and over.
Hey, who told you about my gym membership? Who told you?
Right, exactly.
My wife, hey, I promised to exercise more.
And did you go with January 5th, and then after that, nobody's gone again. So.
Mr. Merker,
That's
you
right.
you owe another $11. In Canada, there's like super cheap gyms, but it's like
And
you owe
you just
another.
put it on automatic pay, and you're done with it. So, anyways, I have enjoyed this. This has been very good.
Yes.
Amazing.
I have to say, when Oren and I chatted before, I said, I don't know how we'll go an hour. And I look in the hour's almost up. It's been really easy to talk to you. But I think I'm really proud of the product. I really feel it's very important for business. I have a degree in business among my other degrees. And even with that, it wasn't practical enough for this. So, I did my economics, and I did my finance, and I did my HR and my marketing, but it didn't help me with day-to-day running a business. I learned big overall concepts. So even if you have that, I think this is extremely practical. And one thing to add that we skipped, it just didn't come up, is that we have an AI module that's built into the product for we have the small business vertical market, but each small business has got something that's specific to them. So you can go into the AI module and you can say, well, I hand make widgets. What do I need to be aware of? And it will create the questions and guidance for you specifically for your business. And that comes all the stuff. If you buy our software, you get the vertical market plus access to all the other topics. And the AI comes with everything also. So
if somebody's making toys or something like that, probably something that we don't do on a regular basis for our governance thing. It's not one of our verticals. But if you do something like that and you're engineering things and doing other things like that, that's where that AI really comes into play. So it kind of supplements and it actually ties in directly with what we offer you. So and it all works together like that. So
Amazing.
Hopefully we got a product that people like. And
yeah. This was amazing, and it was so clear and transparent, and this has been a beautiful session. And thank you, Oren. Thank you, Sue. And we'll pause over here, learning more about Guvrix. Amazing.
Thank you.